thank you, everybody. I believe we're waiting on copies right now of some information that was provided, and as soon as the Board of Adjustment has that, we will jump back into the evidence or the deliberation.
France, we went on like a cruise, a 12 days cruise, which means we landed and had to take a bus in there and take a tour of us trying to get there 2 hours afterwards. We spent $2 in Paris. Oh, yeah, here it is. Started in Barcelona and then we're down the coast. So a lot of the coast I've seen. But we're going to go up, over, and kind of back and forth.
Yeah. The audience right now has the ability to submit some plans as well. I want to make sure that the Board of Adjustment has those before we're able to continue. Welcome. Thank
yes,
you.
I am.
And we can hear you now. Is Amy online as well? Great, thank you. So we'll bring it back to the Board of Adjustment to deliberate on the preceding hearings. Kevin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to take this time to thank everyone for coming tonight. This is not an easy, it's contentious, appears to be a contentious thing. I want to be careful to make sure it's important that everyone came and was free to state their opinions with no booing or hissing, and everyone behaved very well, and I really appreciate that. I also want to make a point that although there's disagreements, I don't like to nullify someone's opinion one way or another. I think everyone has valid points. There's concerns. There's concerns on both sides, and so every person's opinion is valid. So I just want to thank you all for coming. So I'll just kind of throw out my opinions, my thoughts, and then people can just take it from there. The first thing that I wanted to note is the staff recommended this in the first place, and this has not changed. That's kind of important to me. The federal legal issues that we could run into also are a problem, and with that I'll refer to the law opinion by Michael Gotti, page 7. I'm just going to read it as quick as I can. In 2016, the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Department of Justice issued a joint statement regarding local land use laws and the FHA that addresses some of the issues raised in this appeal. Notably, they cautioned that when acting or applying zoning laws, zoning or land use laws, state and local governments may not act because of the fears, prejudices, stereotypes, or unsubstantiated assumptions that community members may have about current or prospective residents because of the residents' protected characteristics. Doing so violates the act, even if the officials themselves do not personally share this bias. Also, I'm going to read part of page 5 as well, which the applicant bears the burden of proof. After all these considerations, in order to approve the conditional use permit, certain findings must be made by the Planning Commission. These are that the conditional use will not be detrimental to public health, safety, and general welfare, adversely affect the established character of the surrounding vicinity, nor be injurious to the uses of property or improvements adjacent to and in the vicinity of the site upon which the proposed use is to be located. Number 2, the conditional use is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Number 3, conditions that are necessary to monitor the impacts of the CUP can be monitored and enforced. Number 4, the proposed use will not be introduce hazardous conditions at the site that cannot be mitigated. And number 5, finally, the conditional use will be supported by adequate public facilities and services or conditions that can be imposed to lessen their impact. from my perspective currently, I feel that at this current time, I mean, I could be changed, but I feel at this current time that the planning commission was wrong in their determination. Because of these, I see no problem. I feel like YS, all the conditions can be met here, basically. Also, all of the comments regarding, a little nervous because this is a lot of people spoken, but basically I feel according to our code that this should go forward. I try not to state my opinions as far as this one way or the other, but I do feel that this home is very much in line with our comprehensive plan, and some of the youth or some of the comments people made were really touched me, and something that someone said was that we need to mentor our youth, and that's extremely important these days. It's very hard being a kid nowadays with with good support, let alone if you may not have that support. So I really do believe very passionately in the value of this. Finally, the house, it's in a beautiful, honestly, I think it's in a way separated from, basically from a large amount of homes. It's kind of isolated. I've driven by this property, I mean, who knows how many thousands of times over the 26 or 7 years I've been here. I think it's a beautiful home with a beautiful view, and what better place to offer healing and restoration than a place like that. And I also want to thank everyone who spoke, who are opposed. I understand the concerns people might have of the unknown, and I realize that this may not make you happy, but that's where I stand currently. We get the conversation along.
Thank you, and Kevin, you did point out something that I do need to state to the Board of Adjustment. At the end of this evening, whether the motion is to grant the appeal or deny the appeal, the Board of Adjustment will need to make the findings given on the back of the motion sheet. Amy is going to try and distill down some of our comments and so that we can see those. But at the end of the night, we will need to make, in one way or another, the 6 findings that are provided on the back of that sheet. So as your comments go through that, if you could keep those in mind, please. And then Tor.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for starting that off nicely. And I too would like to say I appreciate everybody coming forward, and I understand why some folks would be against this. I guess change is hard, but that a lot of the concerns I heard, I kind of puzzled me a little bit in that, like, why would being able to see people be a problem? And I don't see, but I believe that this facility is needed, and I think that's appropriate. I drive by it every day, at least twice a day, and I kind of stop and look around a little bit. It's on HBR. I don't know if it's the busiest street in Sitka, but I'm sure I think it is. And it's not, it's not a close, small neighborhood, and I guess I don't see how being able to see this from above hurts somebody. And I've been to a lot of planning commission meetings in the last couple of years, and there's been a lot of short-term rentals and lodges come forward for conditional use permits, and they frankly would be much, much more disruptive, a large short-term rental or lodge. And I don't think we'd have this level of opposition. And so, I looked at the application and I listened, and I think, as Kevin said, as nicely the way you went through the points there, I think it meets all of those. And I think we should allow this to go through. And it's something where I think we need to look at not just the neighborhood, but the entire city. And I think it's good for the city. I've got a lot of notes here. I'm not going to go through them all, but I think this fits. And I also think that, honestly, if it's going and it's going, people won't know it's there. I mean, they'll obviously know intellectually, but as far as activity is concerned, I just don't think you're going to hardly notice. And so I am in support of it, and I'm not going to repeat what Kevin said, but I think I agree with him. It fits in all the requirements we talked about. So thank you.
So we were presented with a couple of options tonight, and there were basically 3 categories. So one, I think based off the legal opinion, the motion to deny the appeal is just not in our purview. I didn't consider it based off of what we are able to read as part of the information presented. It then comes down to either grant the permit or appeal tonight, or remand for further proceedings. And so I wanted to look into those options. And again, just like Kevin said, I appreciate all of the testimony that came forth. And I'm trying to decide what's the best way to proceed at this point in time, given certain factors. So the first one is if we remand it back to the Planning Commission so that they could revisit the decision, we're basically saying a legal opinion, in essence, is telling you to eat crow and revisit this, which I imagine would be really hard to do. I think if we were told that a decision we made at this body was called into question, it would be hard for us to revisit that with fresh eyes. We would have basically the past of everything that had gone into it. And so I don't know if I'm ready to ask the Planning Commission to do that. My second question had to do with timeliness, and I appreciate the response, and that's a fair consideration. I think I didn't want to present new evidence, but they did submit something in March that outlined a timeline that said they wanted to basically be closing and purchasing after they got their conditional use permit, which has been held up as they're having to appeal and getting delayed because of us. So I think that's a fair consideration, that this seller is available, but they do want to basically leave the community, and in order to do so, they're probably wanting to offload something like this $1 million home. So that was another consideration. I appreciate the answer and the response to the timeliness. The third part is that we are built into the process for a reason, whether we like it or not. We've had to make hard decisions, and we've had to look at basically decisions that were made at the planning level. Those have come to us previously. So how are we held accountable for these difficult decisions? Well, we're either reelected or we're not. But it's basically in our purview to follow through and make those decisions. So I consider that as part of, yes, we are a part of the process. Yes, we can send it back there, concerned about the timeliness. And I guess the last thing is, as I went through every document that was submitted as part of whether it came from Amy and the planning staff, or it came from YAS, or it was meeting minutes, all of that helped paint a picture for us. And I think as I was looking for it, I thought, I bet they didn't mitigate, and I just wasn't finding that. I was finding in their initial application mitigation measures that would address all of those reasons that we should be able to deny a conditional use permit. And they answered every single one of them. Did they end up having to give greater detail? Yes, because there was that public pressure to say, well, we want to know more. Tonight they brought forward policies to say, we do have policies around noise, we do have policies around this. I feel like they have been tested and required to rise above what, as Tor mentioned, somebody who wanted to operate a business would have to do. Because there is this public input saying we need more and more and more. I think they've been very fair in their initial application in addressing the reasons that the Planning Commission would deny it. And I think they provided those mitigation measures that said, we understand that here's how we're going to address it. So I won't get into the discrimination, though I could. I have notes everywhere. I have a lot to say about that. the way that it is presented, it does feel like those concerns came out really loud and clear from the community. So I'm not going to say it was never about that. It was actually about how they're going to get to town. With that said, we don't discriminate. We know that inherently sometimes we want to. We want to control who our neighbors are, and we can't do that unless we buy up the entire neighborhood, which is not something that's going to happen. So with all of that said, I think it's most appropriate for us to grant the appeal tonight. I'm open to further conversation, but I think I outlined kind of the areas and what sort of drove me in that direction. I think a denial is not even a possibility based off of how we came to that decision at the lower level. But I do want us to go ahead and fix this in a way that we could all move forward, because we have to make progress on this issue. So I appreciate YAS and your just consideration that this has taken time. We wanted to do it the right way. We had certain things that had to fall into place. And I want to thank Brian for getting that outside perspective, that legal opinion. I didn't need that on May. I was ready to have this discussion, but that gave me what I needed, because I knew how I felt, and now we have a legal opinion supporting that. So I really appreciated that additional document, and I know that that took time. So I appreciate this conversation. I know it's a hard one. I know that this is a hard decision, and there's a lot of contention around it. And so that's where I'm at this point in time. Thank you for hearing me.
JJ?
Thank you. My understanding of what we are here to do tonight as the Board of Adjustment is just to look at that evidence, and based on what was known at the time of that April 5th meeting of the Planning Commission, did they have enough information to look at the zoning code and Sitka General Code? And that is what I conducted all of my research and my findings based on, is at that time, could they make a reasonable determination? And through the findings and the listings, and I've got pages of notes to cross-reference all of these things, and in those findings, is not detrimental to public health, safety, or general welfare. There's no aspect to their plans and the conditional use criteria that was not addressed in an abundant way. There's these conditions to the use that are what we're seeking clarity on, and there's, other than the 8 on one side, 4 on the other, which totals 12 and is what the target is per unit, I don't see a burden of proof not being met for their plans and goals and objectives. That comprehensive plan piece is also a great indicator of their attempts to align with our vision of the city and helping the community. It's the adequate public facilities and service. They've met that. We've met the reducing of hazardous conditions by mitigating what they need for public health, which is like potential noise. I mean, this isn't a paint factory. This isn't some sort of there's no downside here to housing people. I mean, yes, quasi-institutional, but in a residential treatment environment, it does fit within a residential zone, from my understanding of our definitions in the Sitka General Code. They adequately prevent, manage, and mitigate impacts are there through every layer of their plan. It is my understanding of what the Board of Adjustment is to do is to either grant the appeal, deny the appeal, not considering the federal rules here on housing, and not even considering the need for reasonable accommodations. We're just looking at what the zoning code, it's like a general code, allows for well within, this conditional use permit is well within the code structure. So I want to grant the appeal. Thank you.
Brian, I have a question for you, and I'm going to refer back to Sitka General Code 22.08.710, which is the definition of a quasi-institutional home in our code. It does indicate for no more than 6 persons in an R1 zone and 20 persons in an R2 zone. Do you believe that 6 persons is residents only, or does that include residents and faculty?
I can't speak to that. I think you should ask the planning director that question. She deals with that code constantly.
Amy, as the planning director, do you have an opinion as to what general code speaks to?
Sure. The rest of the code section states that, it talks about the limits, either, 6 persons for R1, 20 persons for R2, or larger, seeking rehabilitation, counseling, self-help, and family environment. And so the rest of the code section speaks to the residents of the facility or the clients of the facility. Again, the numbers then are directly followed up by, those seeking rehabilitation, counseling, and self-help. And so it's not been my interpretation that staff counts towards that number.
Thank you for that opinion. I did read up to 14 staff, and I know they all won't be on site at any given time, but I wanted to make sure that was within the parameters of code to have residents and staff in there. I think one of the most telling things in this process when it first reached the assembly was, well, they were denied in a residential zone. Well, that's easy, let's find them commercial property. That seemed to be the one that would stick out to me as the reasonable solution. However, quasi-institutional group homes are not permitted in a commercial zone, not even with a conditional use permit. Permitted in central business district, and they are a conditional use permit in the public lands district, general island, and then R1 and R2. So to me, when people were looking at making code, they had intended these homes to go into the R1 and R2 zones. To say that they're incompatible with goes against the framers of our code when they wrote this, because they specifically excluded commercial from even having a permitted or a conditional use permit for those zones. So that was a very telling point to me, because I thought this was a very cut and dry, which led down to a lot more research on my side. I did hear the dissent in the crowd. It was a telling fact to me that everyone who lives in the area, I didn't hear anyone who spoke for the house in the area, and I heard that very loud and clear. The people that spoke for it generally lived some distance away. One thing that I did get out of this is that YAS is a licensed facility bound by licensure requirements. That is much more than you can say about any other neighbor who might move in. You don't always get to choose your neighbors, and in fact, they could probably be a whole lot worse than a quasi-institutional home moving in, and you would have very little to no recourse on that. The one part that I do, well, I'll go back to one more note that I have that I believe when this was framed in our code that the conditional use permit is a tool to help manage and check in on this quasi-institutional home. That we as either Board of Adjustment or as a Planning Commission set some parameters and make sure that they're meeting these parameters. If not, then we have further hearings and deliberations on it. So by giving this a conditional use permit as opposed to permitting it, we actually have additional tools to help manage and then check in on this facility. The one point that is a very sticky point to me is that YAS did ask for a variance in code in addition to their conditional use permit. And that's a variance to go from 6 persons in one of the units to 8 persons in this unit. It sounds as if that's one of the units. This is a 2-unit property. It sounds as if this appeal will go through this evening from the comments I've heard. However, I am a large supporter of not granting the variance until this pilot program is proven. At that point, I would ask that YAS came back and got a variance for an additional 2 clients once it has been proven that the program is successful. So I would ask tonight that if the appeal is granted, the variance for an additional 2 clients to go from 6 to 8 is not granted until a later date.
I too want to thank all of you for coming tonight and making this very challenging. So when I decided to do this, I knew that this sort of decision would arrive, and that, you know, there are no great decisions, you know, there's no winning, so to speak, in this environment, and that both sides actually in this case have quite a few points that are quite good. So I hope that YAS has heard that they have some work to do with their neighborhood if they're going to get this, which it sounds like is going to take place. So, and I want to thank everybody for coming in and talking about it. I took a ton of notes, did a bunch of research. I think everybody else has already covered pretty much all of the legal side and code side of things, and I agree with the variance that Stephen brings up as well. So.
Can I?
Oh, no, sorry, just
Please.
So, yeah, my position hasn't changed. I had seen that, I just didn't bring it up about the variance and the amount. But for me, given the fact that staff recommended it without any changes, I'm okay with it as is. But if I'm not really super, I don't really have a strong opinion either way on that, but if Stephen or Tim want to change or approve it with that, how would that work within the motion?
Is it very
Kevin, if you look on motions to grant the permanent appeal, approve with modifications would be the 3rd option. And so the modification to the court request of a variance from 6 to 8 clients on the larger unit.
I mean, I guess I don't really see the difference between, because they only have 4 on the other side, so the total's the same. I mean, they were saying 4 on one side and 8 on the other, so it's the same.
They're asking for 8 clients in one unit in the larger unit and 4 additional clients in the smaller unit for a total of 12.
I mean, because it matters who makes the motion if we,
Yeah.
where we start.
Crystal?
But when would you want them to come back to revisit this? I heard something about the program is successful, so what does that timeline look like, and what do we determine now what to us looks like success?
To me, as the program indicated, they would be ramping up. I would say that once they have a full client load of 6 and 4 in both of the units and have capacity and demand issues along with the appropriate staffing, that would indicate success to me.
6 in the small unit then. And 6 in there, it'd be 12. I don't know, I'm just trying to figure out what.
That's what they had filed for, it was 4 in the smaller, 6 or 8 in the larger.
I think you're thinking they're gonna problem solve and say, well, we want to house 12. We can do 6 over here, we only requested 4 because we didn't want a crowding issue, but if we want 12 and we have to split it across units, rather than have 8 over here, we're gonna move 6 and 6 and we're not gonna exceed 12, right? So that would be kind of their internal processing. So they would still get to 12, they would just be crowding in the smaller unit more people than they, I guess, misutilizing the way that the layout is, right?
On the other hand, if they are running well, I don't think we'll have a problem getting the variance, you know, once they've been running for a while and full, but, I mean, I don't have strong feelings about it.
So, like, saying I don't have strong feelings, but if you, Stephen and James both mentioned that, you know, maybe if you feel passionately about it, you would probably better if you start the motion, but, it's up to you guys.
I don't think passionate would describe it.
Yeah, if anything, I would prefer to completely put this to bed now.
Yeah.
But I do feel that working within code as much as possible is appropriate in this situation. The reason that they wouldn't put 6 clients in the other unit is that the findings are going to be, if you approve as recommended in the staff report, that's only 4 clients on that side. It does lay out right now the amount of clients on the smaller side, and if the Board of Adjustment went forward with that, it has the potential to continue with 4. If you did 6, you would then be in violation of your conditional use permit.
So the motion would be something like we go through that with the exception of 6 instead of 8. So the motion is, it's on this sheet, and then say, with the exception of 6 instead of 8, is that what you're saying? I just want to make sure we get the wording right.
With the modifications to deny the variance to allow 8 people in Unit A and continue with 4 clients in Unit B.
So Amy, if I'm correct, in your recommendation to approve, you didn't have a problem with this difference in the variation. Do you have a comment on that?
Sure. In the staff report for the recommendation, you know, I noted that the code talks about the use in a living unit. And that with the total being the same between the 2 living units of 12, that it was, likely not a huge impact to have 8 in one unit and 4 in the other. Again, if we are looking at a standard size of 12 overall between 2 units. However, I did note in the staff report as well that is a not necessarily a formal variance, but it is a deviation from sort of the standard code, and therefore warrants consideration. So, I don't think that it's, I don't think that it's inappropriate or anything for this conversation to be happening. I think it's totally appropriate. But just personally, the distribution of clients between the 2 units to me didn't seem to make as large an impact so as to warrant not at least considering it.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, it's not a variance, it's a condition. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the code allows as a part of the conditional use permit process to waive or modify certain requirements, and so the way that we handle this is just sort of acknowledging it in the conditions of approval.
actually going to want to try an order, a motion taking that into account.
I can help with that if that's the, you know, 'cause I'm also helping. I've been taking notes about the conversation and trying to kind of translate that into the findings, which I definitely want to walk through as a group when the body feels it's ready. But I can also help craft some language if there is a desire to kind of go the direction of modifying the request.
All right, so I'm going to take a crack at it here. You tell me if I get it right. I move to approve.
Oh wait, hang on.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt. Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we had wanted to have a motion on the findings before we make a
It's the other way
motion.
around.
Other way around.
Other way around. We do the vote, and then we do the findings.
Yeah, let's do the motion on the grant or the denial, and then do the findings that support the grant.
Okay, apologies for my interruption.
Okay. I move to grant the appeal to the permit, to approve the conditional use permit for a quasi-institutional home at 3411 HPR in the R1 mobile home single-family duplex and manufactured home district, subject to the tax conditions of approval listed in the April 2, 2023 staff report, with the exception of residents they'll be limited to 6 clients in Unit A instead of 8. The property, the staff report for CUP 2307. The property is also known as Lot 9, Subdivision Lot 1A, U.S. Survey 2752. The request is filed by Youth Advocates of Sitka. Owners of record are Howard and Rayleigh Arnson.
Second.
Is that okay, Amy? Okay.
Does the Board of Adjustment have any further deliberations on the motion that was made? Kristen?
Yeah, I have a question for Amy. So when they are ready to come back and say we are at full capacity and need 2 more, what does that look like? Who do they come to at planning and what are they requesting?
They would be coming to the planning department and applying to amend their conditional use permit.
Anything else from the Board of Adjustment? Sarah on the motion?
All right, on the motion to grant the appeal as stated, Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
and Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
The motion to grant the appeal passes 6-0.
At this point, we do need to continue on and make findings pursuant to Sitka General Code 22.30.160 chart. Amy, you said you were going to have some guidance on that as planning director.
Yes, so let me share the screen.
Do we not just read off what was in the staff report on 4223?
No, and reason being is because the assembly has made findings of their own, and through your deliberation, you have some additional considerations that that were part of your decision. And so I would advise that you don't kind of just copy over the findings, that you adopt your own findings based on your deliberation.
Also for the Board of Adjustment, and Amy, can you scroll down just a little bit so we can try and see as many at the same time, but having number 1 on there as well. Thank you. So if the Board of Adjustment could take a look at the findings that Amy tried to distill down, if there is anything that the board does not agree with that she put in there, please let us know when we talk about that.
Is it possible to make it
Now make it bigger again.
Yeah.
Old eyes.
We just slowly scroll down starting at 1.
Amy, for the public, could you give an overview?
Sure, so these are the 6 required findings for conditional use permits as found in the Sitka General Code. And what I kind of attempted to do was during the deliberation, when board members were saying, I am in support of it because of, attempted to match those to the different required criteria. And so I'll just kind of walk through those one at a time. And I think we can just kind of edit as we go, and that way we can look a little bit closer together. So, the first is about whether or not the conditional use permit would be detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare, negatively affect the surrounding area, or be injurious to uses or properties in the area. The board discussed that they do not believe it would because the property is located in a high traffic area where increased traffic and activity is unlikely to create noticeable or negative impacts on the surrounding vicinity, and further that the operational plan as submitted addressed or mitigated potential negative impacts.
Does the board have any concerns with that wording?
No, sounds good.
Thank you, Amy. Number 2.
Okay, 2, that the granting of the conditional use permit is consistent and compatible with the intent, goals, and objectives and policies of the comprehensive plan, specifically comprehensive plan policy direction that encourages housing options for at-risk populations and youth engagement. Those were the two areas that I picked up on in deliberation.
Concerns with item 2? Thank you, Amy. Number 3.
Number 3, that all conditions necessary to lessen any impacts of the proposed use are conditions that can be monitored and enforced, and that those conditions can be monitored and enforced through the required state licensure that's necessary for this use in conjunction with the permit, and the opportunity for redress to the Planning Commission as required in the conditions of approval.
Concerns with item 3? That's good. Thank you, Amy.
Okay. Number 4, the proposed use will not introduce hazardous conditions at the site that cannot be mitigated to protect adjacent properties, the vicinity, and the public health, safety, and welfare of the community from such hazard, because the proposed use introduces residential use into a residential zone which the board does not find to be hazardous.
Concerns? Thank you, Amy.
Number 5, the conditional use will be supported by and will not adversely affect adequate public facilities and services, or that the conditions can be imposed to lessen any adverse impacts on such facilities and services, because the property is located on a state-maintained right-of-way and served by municipally owned and maintained utilities that are of adequate design to accommodate the use.
Concerns? Thank you, Amy.
Last, burden of proof. The applicant has the burden of proving the proposed conditional use meets the criteria in subsection B of this section. The applicant has met the burden of proof because they provided operational plans that adequately addressed and or mitigated concerns regarding potential impacts to the surrounding vicinity.
And finally, any concerns with this wording? Thank you. Go ahead, Tor. Thank you, Amy, for adequately capturing the board's thoughts throughout this process so that we may be able to make some findings. I appreciate that.
So make the motion, can we just say make the motion as discussed, or read the whole thing?
I would defer to Sarah on that as a parliamentary procedure.
Brian.
We should make a motion to approve the findings as presented.
Okay, I move to make the following findings in accordance with the Sitka General Code 22.30.160.c, according to what was presented.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any further comment from the Board of Adjustment on the motion? Sarah?
All right, on a motion to make the following findings as presented, Mr. Peck,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbusch?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
And Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Okay, the motion to approve the findings passes 6-0.
Great, thank you to the Board of Adjustment. That concludes our hearing this evening. I'll entertain a motion to reconvene as Assembly in regular session.
I move to convene Assembly regular session.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We are reconvened as the Assembly in regular session. At this point, we will take a brief recess. Assembly, please be seated when you're ready to continue.
S on first reading and amending Title VI Business Licenses and Regulations of the Sitka General Code by updating Chapter 6.16 Sales on Public Property.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-09S. Is there any public, before we do that, would the co-sponsors like to introduce this?
I'm going to let Kevin take over, but I do want to thank Kevin for taking the lead on this because I've been in Sitka for like 2.5 days in the last 2 weeks, so I had no time to digest this. So take it away, Kevin. Thank you for taking the lead.
Yeah, thank you for, and thank you for starting this whole process. Real quick, we get into the discussion after public comment, but between last meeting and this, I met with Brian Hansen and Tony, Sarah, who else was in that meeting, Sarah? Stan, that's right. So we basically discussed it and kind of hashed through any concerns that the staff had and decided on some tweaks to language that everyone was comfortable with, that still kept within the intent of this, and here we are.
Great, thank you for the brevity there. I do appreciate that. Is there any public comment on ordinance 23-09S?
Good evening. My name is Richard Ween. This has to do with the sales of items and permitting, especially noted for actually juveniles. The definition of a juvenile is somebody who is not of the majority. I always felt in a past iteration of this that it would be nice to just say, since our majority here is 18, to say up to 18. I always wondered about taxing this, and will they have to keep records and that kind of thing, or is this just, I'll just say, into their pockets, which is actually a good thing. And it says that incidental sales by juveniles of items made by, does that include food? Can they sell food? And if they do sell food, are they under the same rules of food production that other individuals are who have, carts and so forth, which is within the document that was sent. So I like specificity, meaning up to 18, and we'll call juvenile if it's understood that juvenile is just under the age of the majority. And what about taxes? And I hope they're able to make cookies and lemonade without being too overwrought with regulation. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on the ordinance? Assembly deliberation.
Real quick, just thank you guys for adding a little bit there, clarifying a little bit. But again, the main point is just to allow something besides music. And I think that that's cool. That allowing kids to come out and like I said, if they want to recreate the Lincoln Douglas debates and they get people to watch, more power to them.
Kevin?
Thank you, George. Yeah, and going over this, the intent here is not to rehaul the entire code. It's just really simply, when it was brought to our attention that the technicality of the code didn't allow young people under the age of 18 to do things other than sell a product or singing. So this allows like telling stories or what have you. It's meant to be a very simple change to it. Also, just want to point out too that the Harrigan Centennial Hall manager does have discretion on like it's going to be a first come first served, as it always has been, and the manager can designate where and how many, because the manager is responsible for the safety and the flow of this whole place, and it's really busy in the summer. So I just wanted to make that point, but other than this, I feel like this is kind of a basic, just a technical change.
Tim?
Yeah, thank you for the changes. I think it makes it clearer and less vague and works better. I do have a question about what happened to the harbor master in this scenario. I don't remember us talking about this in the past, and why they, since it was under the Connell Bridge, I think that's where that originally came from. So is this a change for a reason, or did we just do that? It's just the opportunity to do that.
And as clarification, you're referring to line 77 where the harbor master was stricken?
Correct.
Yeah, so we kind of talked about this, and did you want to respond to that? I'd be better if you did. Okay.
It's the code sections for sales on public property. It encompasses all the public property. And when we had Stan in the room, he really wasn't involved in these kind of things. So it seemed more appropriate if we were going to regulate, let's say, juveniles doing their entertaining on, not only in front of Harrigan, but somewhere else on public property, that we might want to designate, have the administrator designate somebody, not necessarily have the harbor master do it. So we expanded the ability of the administrator to designate a person who would issue permits. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'm not saying there's a problem with that particular thing, but it doesn't necessarily stand to reason that the harbor master should be out of this particular thing. The harbor master is responsible for quite a large portion of Sitka's public area. And while the current harbor master may not be interested in doing that, it doesn't necessarily stand to reason that we should pull that person out of this process. I guess that's all. And I'm not going to want to do another reading on this thing. I'm just commenting about. I've seen the harbor master pulled out of a few different things now since I've been here, and I'm kind of curious about that as to whether or not that's the best idea for us as a community, since that person's responsible for a lot of things. I know they report to John, and John could designate, or his successor could designate the harbor master as the designee, but I question whether or not we want to pull the harbor master out of everything, even if this current harbor master doesn't see it as a role.
It's a strong point, Tim, and I actually thank you for that. John, would it be your intent to designate the director of the area in which that person is looking for?
That's correct. I think this added language actually provides some more flexibility on who is going to provide that permit approval, and I'll give an example to express why why this change was made. Over the past, what would you say, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we had a person that wanted to hold a concert at the skate park. The skate park does not fit cleanly into the Harrigan Centennial Hall manager's purview, nor does it fall into the harbor master's purview, and there was no language there about the designee of the municipal administrator. So I had the Harrigan Hall manager and the harbor master both doing this, and we didn't know who needed to approve that permit based on code. So this provides a little more flexibility. Who controls that asset, or who oversees that asset, and then I can designate that authority to them to provide that permit.
So why would we include the Harrigan Centennial Hall manager when you could just designate that person for this particular area? So I guess that's, if we're gonna go down that road, then that's where we should go, as opposed to, I mean, I'm not just arguing to argue here, because I think there's a bigger point, which is these people are responsible for certain areas. We should pull them out of that, again, even though maybe a person who's currently in the role is disinterested. And I think that's, so I mean, maybe we just add that language in, that there could be a designee or designee on top of the harbor master and the Centennial Hall manager. Again, I've seen the harbor master pulled out of a few things so far, so that's why I'm questioning that.
Let me make it clear, Stan did pull out of it. He didn't say, please take me out of it, I don't want to do this. I'll take responsibility for thinking this through and thinking that the Harrigan Centennial Hall manager is the default starting place, because that's where we're going to have most of our people who want to sell things and happen here in this vicinity. And then if there is a question, then we turn to the administrator to designate someone else who's more appropriate. That was my thinking. It could be wrong, you know. I mean, that's
If I could chime in, thank you. I agree with that. And it's not whether Stan wants to be interested or not, or be responsible for this, but for me, I agree with the way Brian's just said it. The Centennial Hall manager is the one that's going to be primarily doing this, and if we add the harbor master back in, it'd be more of like, say, permitted during hours by the harbor master or the Harrigan Centennial Hall or the designee. It just seems to add confusion. So it seems like it simplifies to just have the Harrigan Centennial Hall, and then if it doesn't apply to that, we can just say, call John or the administrator at the time and say, where, assign a designee for this person. It just seems to add clarification. I don't see it as excluding the harbor master.
I didn't say it was excluding the harbor master, but in your scenario that you came up with, clearly you were the one that had to decide if they could have a concert at the skate park, right? Like, you're ultimately responsible for all of you. All these people work for you. So, I think, so that's why I question that particular thing, because the starting point for people interested in doing something in the harbor would be the harbor master. So if they're selling crab off their boat, does John need to be involved in that? I mean, so I guess that's my question. Again, just because someone who's currently in a role isn't interested in it doesn't necessarily mean that that role should not then, going forward, be responsible for that opportunity and the things that happen in that space. Still, we could say that that particular person, if they're disinterested, should refer it to the administrator, but I don't think it changes the long-term impact of removing the harbor master from these things. Remove the person from the position and decide whether the position should be part of it.
So what are the other things that harbor master has been excluded from recently? Mentioned article.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but just to recall that the harbor master has been crossed off on a few of these things.
Because I don't know off the top of my head any, so it'd be good to have that point.
I have the opinion that putting harbor master back in, saying HCH manager, harbor master, or administrative designee is not a substitute or material change to the intent of this ordinance. It's just,
well, let's just do that then.
I really don't. I just don't think it's that. But and I like Mr. Pike's analysis here.
Yeah,
Friendly amendment.
Okay, sounds good.
So we're leaving it as is.
No,
We're not striking out harbor master.
Right, correct.
Great.
Sarah, you're comfortable with that being friendly, not a substantial change?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And I definitely understand Tim's point here, and I only say that not because I even thought we would put that back in, but I just want that for future consideration as we look at these ordinances, because if we don't voice our opinion from the table, then it never gets heard. So, and I also thank the co-sponsors for reworking this. This reads much smoother to me. I understand the wording as written, so it helps me be able to help inform our citizens as well.
And to give due credit, it was primarily Brian and the staff that helped work this out.
And Mr. Pike now.
Mr. Wright, thank you.
Anything further on this item? Sarah?
Right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-09S on first reading, Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
and Mr. Pike.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on first reading.
Item F, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-10 on second and final reading, making supplemental appropriations for fiscal year 2023, the E911 funds, Mud Bay repeater.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-10. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, Richard Wayne. I think this is a good thing. However, due to technical aspects, the question is how well will it work? And I think that once the repeaters go in, I think we need an update as to the quality and penetration of these communications, and actually it should be tested at appropriate points throughout the area. The other thing is that I think it is long overdue where we have not had a report on what's going on in Catlean Bay Road, which is the reason why we need some of these repeaters back there, planning ahead for issues in order to help if there are accidents that we have a communication. I think that the citizens of Sitka need to know what's going on that road, what is the progress, what are the timelines. I understand it's cost it's over $50 million, and at least the buzz is things ain't so good. So we need a report on that. So because this has to do with the well-being of citizens of Sitka who are going to go out there. Thank you.
Is there any further public comment on 23-10? Assembly deliberation. Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-10 on second and final reading, Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on second and final reading, item F.
Item G, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-11 on second and final reading, authorizing the lease of Sitka Marine Service Center to Seafood Producers Cooperative, an 8,400 square foot portion of the Alaska Tideland Survey number 15.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-11. Is there any public comment? Assembly deliberation. Sarah?
Right, on the motion to approve ordinance 2023-11 on second and final reading, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
and Mr. Peck.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item G, on second and final reading.
Item H, please.
I move to approve ordinance 2023-12 on second and final reading, authorizing the lease of Sitka Marine Service Center to North Pacific Seafoods Incorporated, an 8,400 square foot portion of Alaska Tideland Survey number 15.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 23-12. Is there any public comment? Assembly deliberation. Sarah?
All right, on the motion to approve this ordinance on second and final reading, Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Ms. Duncan,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
and Mr. Peck.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0. Second and final reading, item H.
Thank you. That brings us to new business this evening, item I.
I I move to approve Resolution 2023-23 on first and final reading, affirming the month of June as Pride Month in honor of the LGBTQIA+ community.
Second.
Has been moved and seconded. Would either of the sponsors like to introduce the item?
Yeah, I could go ahead and do a quick introduction. So I wanted to thank members of the Pride community who provided assistance with this resolution. Michael and Johnny, they basically held my hands through this. It wouldn't have come to fruition without them, so I want to say a huge sheesh. And this resolution, I kind of envision it doing three things tonight. So it's going to, for the first time, affirm June as Pride Month. It's also going to educate the public on historical injustices that had to be overcome by this community, including why of all 12 months, June was designated as Pride Month, and it serves to show support to a marginalized community group. So I also wanted to thank Tor for being a co-sponsor of this.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this resolution?
Briefly, I stand in support of this.
Your name, please.
My name is Eric Jordan. I rise to speak in favor of this. I have family members and employees and heard the stories, and I think this is a great move. I strongly support this. Thank you.
How goes it?
Good evening, my name is Richard Lee. I do have family members and friends and everything else who are part of the community. I have over a 44-year career in medicine, treated innumerable people, and actually represented a safe space for people, especially during when AIDS was coming out, because people didn't see those who had the infection. And so, especially, no one wanted to care surgically for individuals who had a disease which might be transmitted through the blood. That being said, on line 43 and 44, where it says no individual or community in the United States should have to fear being target of violence or systemic oppression because of who they love and how they identify. I agree. I agree. I agree. However, I cannot support this resolution if it implies that biological males can compete in women's competitive sports at any level. I can hardly imagine if Lydia Jacoby, our very own Alaska Olympic gold medalist, had to compete against a Leah, nay William Thomas, in the Olympics. There is a good chance that her gold would be turned to silver, and not through alchemy or lack of talent, but by politics. I also cannot support this resolution if it implies the sanctioning of puberty blockers and irreversible surgery of those who are not of the age of majority. And I bet, and I will bet, that probably most of the people sitting on the assembly could not give a technical or biological definition of the complex process that is called puberty. So please, when you deliberate, let the citizens know where you stand on those two issues. And in closing, I have to say I stand with parents over government or any other individuals who seek to usurp their authority. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on the resolution? Back to the assembly for deliberation. Sure.
Yeah. Well, Crystal called me, I think I was at a symposium. Anyway, if I would co-sponsor this, and I'm very happy to do so. And it's become increasingly clear to me over the last number of years that the way that people from this community have been treated is entirely because of how they were born. I mean, and to me, that makes it the same as any other, as racism, because you're attacking people, you're demeaning them, you're making their lives harder because of how they're born. And they have no control over that, and nobody has any control over that. And so I think it's important for us to state very clearly that that's wrong. And there's a number of side issues that have been brought up by folks who honestly are trying to figure out a way to attack people from this community without making themselves look bad. And so that's a lot of what you're hearing. And if anybody says this isn't relevant right now, just look at the news. Look at the way people from this community are being attacked across the country, in our own state, and the misinformation. And, you know, honestly, it disgusts me what I'm seeing in the news about. And I would like to think that this would be an unnecessary thing to state our support, but it's not. And we're hearing all kinds of nice little dog whistles about ways people can attack them without actually saying they're attacking. And so this makes it very clear that we don't agree with that, and so, or at least I don't. And so that was why I was glad that Crystal called me, and I was happy to post it.
Crystal?
Yeah, so I brought through a number of resolutions that were kind of first, and I spoke to issues that were of concern to me. So missing and murdered Indigenous women, most recently Filipino American History Month, which is in October, and then each year I know as a body we reaffirm the recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day. This one is probably the most important to me. This will be, as I stated, the first time that we affirm June as Pride Month. And it seeks to be uplifting in nature. So as you read, as I mentioned, it's educational, but I think it also just extends an arm to the community and says, we see you, we feel you, we know that it's a struggle, and we're not going to be a part of it. It's not taking on specific issues, but I guess I just wanted to point out something. So the day that I submitted it to Sarah to include in the packet, ABC News, they put out an article that said a state of emergency issued for LGBTQ community by Human Rights Campaign. The article states that that's the first time that they ever did a state of emergency, and they cited a couple of reasons. So the two that they outlined were legislations targeting this group specifically, and then also threats of violence being inflicted upon members of these communities. So this is not a great time to feel lack of protection, especially from government bodies, which was really concerning to me. So I mentioned that I wanted this to serve as a statement to members of the LGBTQIA+ community here in Sitka that we are not here to oppress you. Those issues haven't come before us as a body, but we've seen it at the federal level. We know it's happening at the state level. There are issues within schools. We know that this is a discussion that isn't at the final end. There isn't resolution. I think I want to go back to the fact that I'm an ally supporting people within this community, and I think I put a little bit too much on them in that really it is our job as allies to carry them and wage that struggle that they're in, because it's hard enough for them to just go through it. And so I mention that because our job as a body that represents the city of Sitka is to build relationships with this community. And so I'm going to use an example. We say that we have unlocked doors, they're welcome to come in. And yet if you've been harmed by government structures in policy or through actions, through even statements that are made, it's difficult for you to feel welcomed within that government that's supposed to serve all of us equally. This year, in that article, going back to that, so this year almost 600 bills were introduced or passed that would restrict or limit rights of this community. And again, I mentioned at the federal, state, school board, local level. It's happening across the board. I'm so glad that Dr. Wee mentioned healthcare, because I was going to bring it up as well. So I have a coworker, and I was having a discussion with her, and I'm closing it out, but I was just talking about how I wanted to show support to this community, and she said, well, we're in healthcare, I don't really know how we really impact that. And I thought of the things that have come up since I've been working for ANTHC, And in the chart, we now have a section for pronouns. So what is the appropriate pronouns? That's brand new. That happened within the last year. We also follow expert recommendations when it comes to gender affirming care. I'm not the expert, but there are people who are. And I'm glad that we as a healthcare organization are listening and making decisions based off of that expertise. And then also when it comes to medical decisions, we can remember a time where same-sex couples, you could not weigh in on medical decisions. Again, I mention this because these are big changes that have happened in the industry that I work in within the last decade, which shows prior to that, people who come from this community were in a way oppressed or victimized because they happen to, as stated in the resolution, care or love or express themselves in a way that feels uncomfortable to a lot of people. So that's why I brought it forward. I mentioned it was for those 3 reasons. I wanted to uphold this community, but for that ABC News article to be released on the same day that I turned it in, that let me know that it absolutely needs to happen now. As Tor stated, this is a feel-good one, but we are one of the minimal. If you look across the board, there's a lot of negativity being targeted at this group, and I don't want to be a part of it. In fact, I want to, in a way, open the doors and say, you are a part of us. We see you, we hear you, we understand, and we're going to try to be allies. So thank you for considering this resolution.
Kevin? Sure. Okay. So thank you for Crystal and Tor for bringing this up. I think this is appropriate, and I think this is a very just positive kind of thing, and I don't see anything controversial in it. Like somebody said, this avoids anything that is highly confidential or confrontational or whatever you want to call it. I think this is a very positive thing, very good, and I can support it.
Wow, I support this wholeheartly. I think, having been in education, we've had a similar journey, as it sounds like Crystal was describing for her organization. And I think in my career in education, I can say that there's been a distinct change for the better, and I support this particular resolution.
Julia?
Thank you, Crystal and Tor, for bringing this forward. The word uplifting you use, Crystal, is exactly what I felt when reading this, and I appreciate your diligence and timing to bring it towards the beginning of this month. Coming from the design community, it's so valuable to see people find themselves and express themselves wholeheartedly, as Mr. Pike said he felt in reading this. And thank you for bringing this to our little town on an island in Southeast Alaska.
Anything further from the Assembly? Sarah, on the resolution?
Okay, on the motion to approve Resolution 2023-23 on first and final reading, Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 on item I.
That brings us to item J this evening. This is consideration and award of the request for proposals submitted for the available funds in the Fisheries Enhancement Fund. Tonight, there will be an opportunity for each applicant to speak to their applications with a 5-minute limit. The Assembly will then discuss on the potential award amounts, and then a motion would be in order at that point. So starting off tonight, I'm going to pull a name out of the hat, and it looks like Sitka Sound Science Center. If you could go first, if you'd like to go over your application for these fisheries enhancement funds. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Lisa Bush, and I'm the Executive Director of the Sitka Sound Science Center. Our mission is science research and science education for coastal Alaska. And I'm here tonight first to thank you for providing fishery enhancement dollars to our organization in the past, and to ask for your support for these funds this year. As you may know, because many of you are lifelong Sitkans or have lived here a long time, Sitka Sound Science Center inherited the salmon hatchery that Sheldon Jackson students built in 1972. It was the first hatchery permitted by the state of Alaska, and it is the only teaching hatchery in the state. Today, we utilize the hatchery to teach thousands of people annually about salmon, the importance of it in our culture and community, and to train a workforce. Now more than ever, aquaculture plays an important role in our local and regional economy. With the king salmon fishery closed off to trollers for right now, we look to hatcheries as a way to help enhance fishing catches, which in turn provides Sitka with over $1 million annually from the raw fish tax. Make no mistake, we are not taking credit for all that. Much of salmon aquaculture in our waters is provided by the Northern Southeast Regional Aquaculture Association, who partners with us on a number of projects. Our hatchery is literally small fry. We are permitted for 250,000 coho, 15 million chum, and 3 million pink that return to Crescent Bay and Deep Inlet. Fishermen of all walks of life catch fish that originate with love and a whole lot of hard work from the Sheldon Jackson hatchery. NSTRA also releases king salmon from our facility as well. The money generated from the fishery enhancement tax was meant to go towards fishery enhancement, which means hatcheries. All of Sitka can catch the salmon that begin at our facility. Children and elders fish from the beach next to the Science Center. People catch them from open subsistence skiffs, from commercial fishing vessels, and from charter boats. The funds we receive from this fund go directly to hatchery operations and production, and help us put fish in the water and create food for people. The Science Center introduces every K-12 student to fishery science and other marine-related disciplines by providing hands-on experiences and supporting science curriculum at all Sitka schools. We have over 30 educational programs for kids, college students, visitors, and adults, including apprenticeships, internships, mentored research opportunities, after-school and in-school programs on a breadth of science subjects. Not just to help build a science or aquaculture workforce, but to expose our community members to future voters to the tools of science so that they can use critical thinking, problem solving, validating, and observation when they buy their food, make healthcare decisions, and participate in civic engagement activities. We also are part of research that involves aquaculture and mariculture. We conduct field work for a state long-term study that looks at the relationship between hatchery and wild salmon, and we are providing laboratory space for kelp and mariculture researchers. This year, we have completed our spawning and incubation facility, we affectionately call the Spiffy. And our board of directors would like to invite you and the whole community to our grand opening of this new structure on July 7th at 6 o'clock. We thank you for your careful consideration of our proposal, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. If we have any questions, we'll call you back up.
Okay.
I'm assuming that'll be 6 a.m., right, for the opening? I'll be there. And Alpha, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Linda Benkin, Executive Director of Alaska Inland Fishermen's Association. Thanks so much for working late tonight and for this opportunity to speak to you about our fishery enhancement program. Our mission is to promote sustainable fisheries in thriving fishing communities. We work to achieve that mission through research, policy, and education. The proposal we submitted to you for fishery enhancement centers on our young fishermen's work. We also tried to include updates on some of our other work, since it all is integrated to work together to support Sitka's fisheries in the future of our young fishermen. We hope you've had an opportunity to read through that. I'll try to hit some program highlights and let you know how we've used your investment to leverage funds from outside sources. First, our crew and apprentice and training program. Our Crew Apprentice program we launched with Alpha member Eric Jordan, who's here as well to speak tonight. It's become a model for similar programs around the country. 90 young people have worked through our program, which provides a safe and guided pathway to a job on a commercial fishing boat. We also provide twice annual 2-day workshops, or fisherman expos as we call them, on topics that fishermen identify for us, on issues they would like to learn more or be better at, to support their success as fishermen. Months ago, we applied with Alaska partners to a new federal program. We helped support the Young Fishermen Development Act and learned just last week that our project has been funded to further expand our Young Fishermen Training Program and to support the growth of similar programs in other parts of the state. We operate 2 other fishery programs to support access for young fishermen. One is a low-risk, low-cost loan program. We've deployed $1.5 million through program and related investment funds to support young fishermen entering these fisheries. We've also, in the past year, secured $1 million in grant funding to anchor additional fishery access in this community and support that access, make that available with a particular focus on rural and indigenous young fishermen. Together, these programs are enhancing opportunities for local fishermen, processors, and Sitka's working waterfront. Our seafood distribution and marketing network, we use that as an important education and outreach tool to connect people who care about the health of our fisheries to our fishermen who are working hard to maintain and enhance the health of those fisheries sustainably over time. We also expanded during COVID to do seafood distributions to family in need, providing over 640,000 seafood meals to people in Sitka around the state and some to tribes in the Pacific Northwest. We've leveraged that work to secure now over $300 million in USDA and other foundation funding to enhance Alaska's food security and also to create more pathways to USDA funding for seafood nationwide. Last but not least, our Fishery Conservation Network, which engages fishermen in addressing conservation and management issues and underlies all our other work. Our FCN allows experienced fishermen to mentor and assist young fishermen in gaining skills, knowledge, and new conservation tools. As we included in our proposal, we're in the final stages of negotiating a substantial award with the Department of Energy to expand our energy transition initiative, and we look forward to working with the city to make Sitka a leader in this space. Again, your investment in this work encouraged the Department of Energy to select Alpha and this community as a partner to move the country forward through this work. That's a quick overview. I hope you recognize that your investment in that work gives you bragging rights in our success and helps us leverage additional funds to enhance Sitka's working waterfront and our local fisheries. We thank you for your past support, and we appreciate your support moving forward. Thanks so much for the opportunity to comment. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And if we do have questions, we'll call you back up. Appreciate it. So next, the Assembly is able to have a discussion about potential award amounts. This evening, I do want to start it out. Now, I don't have all the basis and facts on this. I just brought it up with Brian earlier. But the Fisheries Enhancement Fund is fairly loose on how it can be spent. And it has typically gone to the organizations and entities that have applied. But I think we all understand a looming crisis right now with king salmon and the Wild Fish Conservancy's desire to continue their path in getting king salmon listed as an endangered species. So I'd just like to submit it for consideration that the Assembly use this $50,000 towards a legal fund. I have not yet identified that fund. I'm not even 100% sure that we can go outside of the request for funding tonight. But I did talk with Brian earlier, and he said it's a little bit of a loose fund, and then the assembly can dictate how that's spent. So it's simply a point for consideration, as I know that that's out there, and I know that this would help. So other than that, I appreciate both of the requests that came in. I appreciate that both of the amounts total the amount that we have available for disbursement. I'm glad that they had a Coca-Cola or a coffee before this, and we came to an agreement there. The only concerning thing for me, $50,000 is a lot of money, and I'm glad that we have that to give out now, but that means 5,000 fish boxes at a very minimum left this community. So to see a large amount there, there's also a potential downside to that compared to 3,060 boxes that left the town last year. So it's just it's a positive with the negative there. So, Gord?
It's an interesting idea, and I'm assuming we can do it, which is maybe a bit of a vague assumption. If we, I'm thinking out loud here a little bit, but what if we distributed 25,000 tonight proportionally to what they asked for, and reserve the other 25 for possibly the supporting the lawsuit. But if we don't, by not actually allocating it, by saying that we're just going to do half tonight, then we possibly, it could, if the ATA comes to us and says we need to do that, we could open it up again, and then it would be an application. And that's just a thought as a way to do that, to not giving it to somebody who didn't ask for it, but still having it out there. And I kind of like the idea when you were talking of discouraging, because the actual dollar amount probably isn't that big a deal to the people who are asking for it tonight, as it is a show of local support. Although I'm sure that the dollar amount makes a difference too. But I think given who was asking for it, if we reserved half of it for future legal issue, just don't even necessarily have to say what it's for, but we all know. And we'll open it up again in a few months. It's just a way of possibly doing that.
Chris?
And I know you can't speak to it, but I know that you actually brought that forward to us previously. So what did we pay? Was that out of the general fund that first time, January?
Yeah.
I guess I anticipated seeing a third application as part of this process, and we got a document that said these two were timely and received and they're complete. I'm just confused where this fits in. So I don't know why that application didn't come forward for consideration, but now we're making an allowance to extend so that we can possibly fund, which I just think is detrimental to the two. I thought that, so I'm just also thinking out loud about how we're making allowances, and I don't know how I feel about that, because it's not that they extended that saying, oh, there's only two of us, let's raise it up so that we equal 50,000. Now we're putting a third player into the conversation. I know why we are. This is an important issue. But I think even in January, at that time, we were talking about this is a possible funding source down the line, and I don't see a completed third application that was submitted. So I just don't know if you have more of a background behind whether or not they feel okay at the moment, but they were going to come to us when funds got low. If we need to basically buffer and set aside money, I don't know where it's at, and I don't have that answer, but I do feel like we did receive 2 complete applications. So I don't know. I don't know. Just thinking out loud.
And I can agree, because setting precedent can be great or dangerous. Tim?
Well, we put together a process. We played this process out. We have in front of us the results of that process. As far as I'm concerned, that's what we've chosen to do. So when we put it out there, we said, this is what we're doing. We didn't say, we're going to put it out there, and we're going to see if maybe we'd like to give it to somebody else. So, I think for me, these were timely, as Chris pointed out, and complete, and we've already put together a process, and I'm loath to change that at this point. If they come back and ask us for money, maybe they ask for $50,000. trying to figure out what we're doing with that. So I think, to be quite honest with you, the legal fees should be painful as opposed to, because it's a community problem. We need to make sure everybody understands how much this is impacting all of us. And so I'm not in favor at this point in time in setting aside this, because we didn't say we're going to do that from the start.
I believe that's how I feel as well, and that's why I was cautious. So it's good to hear that there's also that perspective. But I guess I just saw money that was available that could be spent towards a legal fund, and it would be to the detriment of Sitka Sound Science Center, because I know how they use that match. It would be to the detriment of alpha, but if king salmon are listed as an endangered species, that's to the detriment of the entire state as well. So I appreciate the conversation. Thor?
I was just trying to find a pathway to accommodate what you were talking about, because I think it's a good point, but I don't, Tim brings up a good point that if and when they come to us for more money, it probably should be from everybody, because it affects everybody. I guess the one side note on that is, if the commercial fishermen can't catch the king salmon, but the sport guys can, we at least get $5 a box.
$10, which we probably need to adjust for inflation after quite some time.
All right, thank you, everyone. I agree with everything. I like the creative thinking about trying to get some more money, because it does affect all of us. But I think, yeah, I tend to agree with the comments Tim and Crystal were making, that we set out a process and we just carried through with this process. And there's a need for a money request for funds, for legal funds later. We'll deal with that when it gets there. I do agree it is a community problem that needs to be shared. But for now, I think we should just make the motion.
It sounds like there's a consensus.
Yeah, I move to award $35,000 to the Sitka Sound Science Center and award $15,000 to the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to award $35,000 to the Sitka Sound Science Center and $15,000 to the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association from the Fisheries Enhancement Fund. Is there any public comment?
Good evening, my name is Richard Lee. I have had the opportunity to deal with fisheries enhancement. I remember some years when I was on the assembly, there were many, many people who were applying for this, and there were arguments about what enhancement means. Believe it or not, giving to the ATA legal fund is actually potentially fisheries enhancement on its own merit. But I am so very happy that people are sticking to process. Process. I like the law, and I like process and how things are done. So I'm glad you did it. And that being said, the way I look at these things is I look at the financials. And I really feel that Alpha certainly mentioned, a key word to me is that they use these funds to leverage. And I think it's important. I've heard from the members here that leverage is a good thing. And so I don't think Alpha would complain if you made it a 50-50 split. And I think that you certainly can do that. I think that they have a unique program. And it's always a wow as to what Sitka Sound Science Center does. What Ms. Bush described is just an awesome array of programs that they have, and congratulations. And their financials really show it. And so they do well. So my notion is make it 50-50. I think both of them attack the problem in different ways. And I just think that Alpha was being modest. And so I'll just say, glad you're following process, and I won't hold you to it though. And bottom line is, do the right thing.
name's Eric Jordan. Mr. Mayor, Assembly members, staff, public. My son came to me with this idea for this program years ago when my wife retired, and I brought it to Linda Bankin, and she introduced me to my first crew member who's spoken to this assembly before, Catherine Kutzmeyer, and Linda led us to blossom this crew apprentice program, and now we have usually over 100 applicants. And last year I took 21 people. 18 of them were either family or local people. One was from elsewhere in Alaska, and one was from France, and one from Seattle. And just tonight I went and picked up the latest crew member to come. She came from Santa Fe. She'll be fishing with me for almost a month. What I want to do is communicate a couple letters that people here in town who couldn't come tonight offered. First one's from Lily Garza. The Alpha Crew Training Program and Eric Jordan have given me an incredible opportunity to learn trolling skills on the fishing vessel Agata. Last year when I applied, I wasn't sure what to expect, but Eric has taught me everything from how to bait herring to how to clean a fish in under a minute. These skills allowed me to teach others the same skills and pass it on to other women in Sitka. The True Training Program is a unique opportunity for folks with no experience to enter the field in a safe manner. Eric always ensures we get home safe and that we all feel comfortable on the boat. I came to Sitka to fish, and a year and a half later I'm still here, and I don't foresee leaving. I will always be grateful for the opportunity and everything I've learned on the fishing vessel Agata. Lily Garza. Here's from Ellie Schmidt. I started crewing with Eric Jordan on the Agata 8 years ago through the Alpha Apprentice Program. I was in Sitka for the summer this residency, and I plan to be in Sitka for no longer than 8 weeks. After fishing for chum and coho with Eric for a few weeks, I signed up for the next season and the next. I worked for the next several seasons with Eric alongside my friends Sophie and Catherine. Not only did my co-deckhands and I make our living, but we also learned about navigation, diesel engineering, maintenance and provisioning, marine safety and maritime law, fishery politics, climate change, and much, much more. Later, I also worked for 2 years on a gill-ender through Alpha's Apprentice Program with Jack Lang. Alpha's Apprentice Program, in my experience, allows young people and especially women to work in an industry that can be difficult to start in. Through the program, I was able to feel safe and supported in a workplace that can be dangerous in many ways, especially for young people.
Thank you for your comments this evening, sir. In fairness to every, I said thank you for your comments this evening. In fairness to everybody, I'll give you the 3 minute limit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I think we're really,
You can say your name for the record, sir.
Yeah, I can't. I think we as a community are really, really fortunate to have these two entities to be distributed here tonight too. They, you know, they're phenomenal. The amount of work and forethought, we're really, really fortunate. Also like to comment that through Alpha's diverse portfolio of projects, you know, a lot of time has been spent in supporting ATA and the trawlers and in the political process, and that's one of the focuses of Alpha, is that kind of support of our fleets here, all of our fleets, not just longliners, but our Alpha members are from other fisheries as well. But I guess main point is just that we're really fortunate to have the two groups here in this town doing what they do. So I don't know. I like 50-50. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment on the award amounts, 35,000 and 15? Assembly. Sarah?
Okay, on the motion to award $35,000 to the Sitka Science Center and $15,000 to the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association. Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
And Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Assembly, it is past the top of the hour. Happy to take a break if you need. We are coming up on a time where we need to extend as well, which we may have to do to get through.
2 minutes.
Please take a very brief recess and we'll come right back.
I'm happy to do my second.
The whole month of June on the schedule is wake up at 5, so I can go swimming.
Perfect, JJ, the Assembly just sat down as well. So the Assembly is seated. We will continue on with our agenda tonight on item K.
I move to authorize the municipal administrator to apply to the Alaska Department of Healthy and Equitable Communities Round 2 funding for the purchase and shipping of a 2022/2023 Ford E electric transition 350 van.
Second.
John, you have Bree and Ron here to introduce this item.
Yes, Mayor, to quote Shakespeare, since brevity is the essence of wit, I will be brief. I'll give a quick introduction to this since we're running up on time. But essentially, we authorize the appropriation of 2 electric vans for custodial purposes through the short-term tourism plan. One of those vans has been purchased, and the infrastructure has been put in place to charge the vans. Like I said, that one has been ordered. There's a second van. We're still trying to meet the appropriation. This opportunity popped up under the same program that we applied for the net shed. We received $133,000. There's further opportunity, so we're going to pursue another grant through this same program to fund that second van.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on Resolution 23-076?
Good evening, this is Richard Mean. Actually, anytime you can get funding for vehicles like this, and it is an electric vehicle, so I think that fits in with people's ideas and plans. But actually, this is kind of interesting. It's for the application for the Alaska Department of Healthy and Equitable Communities round funding. Now, the interesting thing is that this is potentially for a 22-23 Ford E-Transit 350 van. Needless to say, as soon as you mention the car name, I Google it and go to Kelly Blue Book and so forth, and the memo listed it as $60,000 plus 10 for transport. However, in looking through various dealers and so forth, it ranges from $45,000 to $49,000, and that includes $49,000 to 12-person van. Hopefully, you're getting a lot of extras, leather seats, and stereo. Good sound system, I hope. But what is very interesting is the range. Ford has always had a traditional problem with range. They closed down the 150 factory because they had issues in producing the electric vehicles. And the range here at its max is, they listed, and this is from the Ford Motor Company, 126 miles for the range. And within Sitka, you think things are good. But one interesting item for this, and I definitely will keep this for my quotable quotes, is that the reasoning for this is for the janitorial services at Sitka and Borough of Sitka public restrooms. So that is the reasoning that was listed in the memo for the restrooms, because it helps prevent the spread of COVID-19. And clean is good. And they use the notion, meaning the memo, that 538,000 cruise passengers come in. And we know how much overuse causes unsanitary conditions and spreads disease. But here's the keeper quote. The keeper quote is that cruise ships are a well-known vector for transferring illnesses such as COVID-19 to the communities they visit. Wow, I like that. And so I'm glad these 2 vans will help mitigate that. But again, we are using the city's resources, which we may have been able to apply for other things. Again, things that CPET should be paying for, since we're doing it to mitigate tourists, that this is not what it should be. We need to spend our money better and ask for better things.
Is there any other public comment on the application? Back to the Assembly for deliberation.
Just thank John and his staff for finding this grant. I think it's going to be nice to see us paying ourselves instead of Petro or Delta Western. So, be voting for it.
John, I do have a question on here. The fiscal note says that we will we'll get an appropriation. Is that because this grant doesn't fully cover the second van, or is that just the flow of money?
That's the flow of money. Once the money comes out, an appropriation has to be tied to that specific pot of funding.
Okay, yeah, understood. I was reading it 4 different ways and wanted to make sure that this grant will fully cover at least the initial cost. Of course, we'll have maintenance and upkeep of a larger fleet as well. And then just one thing in the memo that I take a little issue with. It indicates that we will get less restroom efficiency and frequency of cleanings with just 1 van. I tend to find that a team of 2 can work through one restroom area just as efficiently as a single guy in a single van in one restroom, and then a single guy or a single person and a single at another restroom. So I think a team of 2 in 1 van can do it just as efficiently and just as quickly. Anything else from the Assembly? Sarah?
All right, on the motion authorizing the municipal administrator to apply, Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0 on item K.
Brings us to item L.
I move to authorize the municipal administrator to submit a letter of intent to the U.S. Department of Energy Grid Deployment Office, Section 247, maintaining and enhancing hydroelectricity incentive program for funding to support Phase 2 and 3 of the Green Lake Rehabilitation Project.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. John, do you have an introduction on this one?
I do. Again, another quick introduction. Thanks, Mayor. When we did our visit to DC, in the bipartisan infrastructure law, DOE presented to us, as you remember, the card with the couple of programs on there, Section 242, 243, and 247. We've already submitted an application for Section 242. This is an application for 247 to facilitate, hopefully, the rehab of the Green Lake facility, phases 2 and 3, which we've estimated at $11 million. Under this program, this is meant to enhance hydroelectric facilities to ensure generators continue to provide clean, affordable electricity, improving dam safety, and reducing environmental impacts. I think this fits very cleanly. If you look in the fiscal note, the incentive payments shall not exceed 30% of the cost of the applicable capital improvements. And since our estimate was $11 million, the application amount is for 3.6 to meet the 30% of that estimated cost.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on the application?
Good evening, Richard William here. I think these grants are wonderful, and it's OPM, other people's money, and I'm very happy that the flow continues. this may not happen forever, so I hope we get some of these Blue Lake, Green Lake issues handled. And I'd like to thank those individuals who helped snip out these grants and get them. But I do believe the future may have some financial difficulties, so we need to, I'll say, do as best we can now. Thank you.
Any other public comment on the application? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
Okay, on the motion authorizing the municipal administrator to submit the letter of intent, Mayor Eisenbeis?
Yes.
Ms. Carlson?
Yes.
Mr. Mosier?
Yes.
Mr. Pike?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen?
Yes.
And Ms. Duncan?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0 on item L.
That would bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
Hi, my name is Lisa Bush, and I should have read this under the Pride resolution, and I didn't, but I was very disturbed by some of the comments by Mr. Mean, so I really want to read it now. This is from the Science Center. Pride Month is focused on increasing visibility and raising awareness of the culture, experiences, and equality of people across a wide spectrum of identities. As a community organization, the Science Center has many reasons to support Pride. Pride celebrates inclusion and encourages us to embrace diversity in experiences and self-expression across society. When people feel safe and supported, they challenge norms, ask questions, and share new ideas. These are all science practices. Historically, the scientific establishment and science organizations have excluded LGBTQIA2+ people from research and policy-making positions. At the same time, science research has often been used to justify discrimination and bigotry against the queer community. Today, LGBTQIA2+ people working in science, technology, engineering, and math continue to struggle to openly be themselves at work and in their communities. The Science Center believes that when a diversity of people participate in the scientific endeavor, the science community collectively benefits. We are actively working to create a supportive environment where the wonder and excitement of learning and exploring together is accessible to all our community members. I'd like to thank you for passing the resolution this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bush, for reading that. I think that's an awful...
If you could state your name for the record, please.
My name for the record is Richard Ween. I think that that's an awful broad brush you paint my thoughts with, which we have never had a conversation. I represented 2 items which I felt were of concern, and I expressed it, and I am very happy to do that. And I'm also happy to speak with you at length and depth on this. Getting back to the persons to be heard, as you know, this is a busy economic week. There's the CPI, which came out yesterday. Tomorrow, the Fed is meeting to talk about whether they're going to pause, skip, or increase the rates. And on Thursday is the retail sales. And despite all of the things that happen and are said as far as the CPI from yesterday, the truth of the matter is the individual consumer is affected very greatly by what's going on. And there's a lot of economic number manipulation. And I feel that Sitka is, as always, particularly vulnerable for these kind of economic blows. And that's why, if the spigot is open to obtain these grants, I think it's wonderful. But the question is what it is and will be Plan B. As far as this evening went with the CUP for the 3411, I think ultimately when I read through everything, it represented actually a tainted process, and by tainted, it seems like everybody was going everywhere else, in every direction, and it was fairly divisive. And to me, I think the best thing to have done would be to remand. And to me, remand means it hits the reset button and starts the process again, where good information will be given to the people of Sitka, and hopefully these kind of things will not continue again. I think that there are a lot of issues here, and hopefully this is where it will end, but it may not. So, gosh, I wish I had that $1 million to live in that house, but I do not. And by the way, they keep saying in all the paperwork it was Lisa Murkowski's money, but I don't think she wrote a check. I think it's taxpayers. Thank you.
Anyone else for persons to be heard this evening? I do have one quick but important report this evening. I did meet with some representatives of the Sitka Summer Music Fest, Alex, Zool, and Alfredo. They wanted to talk about the idea of Sitka becoming a sister city with a town in Spain who also has a massive music festival as well. Zool and Alfredo. Alfredo is the representative from that music fest. They've been friends for a long time, and they'd like to strengthen our partnership through the arts. I have a website, although I can't read it, but it's dimf.com. If the Assembly would like to learn more. This is just exploratory at this point. I've met with Melissa Henshaw at the city about the potential of a sister city. Another one, and it is possible. There's not a codified way to do that. But if the Assembly has any concerns with this process continuing, please let me know. I can try and address those. But if not, I'll let Alfredo know that we are preliminarily interested, and then come back with a little bit more solid information. So just a very brief talk with them, just to kind of get the Assembly's feeling on that. So that's all I have this evening. John, do you have anything?
A really quick report, Mayor. Thank you. I've been working on a complete overhaul of our taxi code, and that has been presented to you all just in draft form to individually respond to me if you have any questions or concerns on the content that I'm putting in there. As that's being reviewed by legal and outside counsel, once that's complete, I'll bring that to police and fire for some public comment, possibly a town hall, and some input on it. But we are moving forward with cleaning that up and aligning our code with essentially everywhere else in the nation, and the standards that are applied there.
Brian?
No report.
Any liaison representatives? Sarah?
I have no report.
The only thing that I forgot under my report is congratulations to Tribal Chairman Woody Widmark on his accomplishments in the youth sports. There was a front page article the other day. Now a lifetime member, so he will. He well deserved. I think he's been an ump for longer than I've been around. So congratulations to him. No executive session this evening. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you for your time today, Assembly. We have 1 minute left if anybody's interested.
My watch is telling me it's past my bedtime.
Yeah, no, so what it is
You're right, it wasn't on me.
Yeah.
Sponsor of the Summer Music Festival.